Security Halt podcast. Let's go.
You're dealing with an expert in guerrilla warfare. With a man who's the best. With guns, with knives, with his bare hands. A man who's been trained to ignore pain, ignore weather, to live off the land. Job was to dispose of enemy personnel. To kill. Period. Win by attrition.
Brandt McCartney, welcome, dude. How you doing?
Doing well, man. Very blessed. Grateful for another day.
Heck yeah, man. Dude, it's remarkable being able to meet somebody that is in the fight, as we like to say, fighting back against something that's affecting so many of our veterans. And you have, we always think that these causes, that these initiatives are being led by individuals that are, veterans, and they're led by guys who are on the ground. But we have to remember that our families are also sometimes the ones leading the way. And your story, man, it hits home, and it resonates with so many people that have lost a loved one to these demons. And today, man, like I am just excited to have you on to share your testimony, but also to discuss the way that your journey shifted from one of, mourning, grieving, and dealing with the loss of a brother into finding your new mission.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I had a conversation with a mentor when I first lost Matt, right? When I was thinking about starting the 38 challenge, and what I really wanted to do was become a SEAL, right? Or an operator in some point. And he said, "Hey, do you think you'll be able to help more people on the battlefield or by starting this nonprofit?" And from there, it's very clear that, Matt died for a reason. God has a reason for everything. And, Matt's saving a lot more people in heaven through his legacy than he ever could have on the battlefield. And I think from just the nonprofits in this space, the landscape of it all, I mean, there's pros and cons, right? I don't know what it's like to watch my best friend die. I don't know what it's like to see a baby dead on the side of the road. I don't know what it's like to take someone's life. But in some ways it's an advantage, right? Because I'm not weighed down by those demons.
Yes.
And I can take it from a different perspective, right? I can take it from a unbiased, kind of outside of the circle perspective, right? Which in our case has worked out well. But yeah, man, I'm just grateful to be able to have this conversation and to, like I said, be able to help people through my brother's legacy.
Yeah. And the thing that's impactful that I want to start off with is we tend to think of our exposure to blast as being like everything that happened in the military. We don't take into account, like, the vast majority of us were athletes. We were football players. We were wrestlers. We were guys in the gridiron. And we failed to recognize that as being some of the most impactful issues, some of the places where we were impacted the most by these concussive blasts. Like, tell us your story about growing up with your brother.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, just to add to that, it's, like a lot of you guys were athletes, especially in the special operations community, but you also carry a lot of baggage from your childhood. It takes to be a high performer typically takes a traumatic childhood, right? Because you know how to operate in chaos because your life growing up was chaos, and then your brain was developed that way. So you feel the most comfortable in chaos. And so you're bringing in that, not only bringing in extra, impact to the brain, right? And extra hits to the head, but you're also bringing in, more, and in most cases, a lot more baggage and trauma from your childhood. So just wanted to make that point. But yeah, man. So I was born in St. Louis, Missouri. My brother, Matt Brewer, was my half brother. So Matt actually lost his dad to suicide when he was younger. It's just another layer to the story, man. But his dad was a phenomenal pastor. Got into a really bad accident where he ended up losing his leg because of the pain medication, those types of things. He ended up taking his life. But yeah, I remember hearing a story of when Matt heard that he was going to have a brother. He just started doing the worm on the floor and like knocked over a bunch of dishes. I think he was 10 or 11 at the time, right? So he was 10 years older than I was. So yeah, and that just kind of sums up our relationship. He basically raised me. He was very protective of me. I looked up to him as a superhero, right? As a best friend and as a great older brother. So yeah, I learned most things of how to be a man through him, right? He would get me on, he would put a samurai sword in my hand and we would chop open watermelons. We'd watch Rocky movies together. He'd teach me about James Bond, bought me my first bottle of cologne. I'd be 6 years old looking at beautiful women by the pool. Like I definitely grew up at an early age. But yeah, Matt in high school was a all-state wrestler, all-state linebacker, all-state running back, excelled in everything that he did. I took that up, right? Just playing football, baseball, sports my whole life, being taught by Matt. Matt ended up going to the Naval Academy where he wore the number 38 there, hence, why there are a bunch of gold 38s on my body. Was a 2-year starter there at middle linebacker, tied the school record of forced fumbles, was a heavyweight boxing champion there. And then after that, he served in the Marine Corps for 8 years doing heavy artillery special operations work. Did a stint with the United Nations in Mali. So yeah, man. I got Matt's dog tags tattooed on my back, attached to a crown of thorns next to a cross when he was alive. Right. That's we were very, very, very close. So as you can imagine, it was. It was definitely the worst day of my life. Getting that phone call and a feeling you can't explain, right? Just your heart being ripped out, right? But again, very, very grateful for the opportunity to wake up every day with passion and purpose, right, and the ability to help others through his legacy.
Yeah, it's the thing I always go back to is like, if we just sit with our suffering and do nothing with it, rather than turn it into a purpose and a new mission, like we don't do anything for that in honoring the people that we lost. We just continue to suffer, and suffering for the sake of suffering leads to nothing. It doesn't do anything, but you can take that and make it a powerful motivator into doing so much good for the world, for others. And that's what I really advocate for. Our veterans are out there struggling, like get healthy, get better, and then find a way to help others overcome what they're dealing with. How did you find yourself in this space after, you lose your brother? And I would imagine there's a lot of self-reflection. What was that initial catalyst to say, like, I got to dive into this. I got to study this?
For sure, man. Yeah, I think, a couple things. So and I always get emotional with this, but, Valentine's Day, 2021, it had been a couple weeks since me and my brother last spoke, leading up to his, he was in a transition period after he got out of the Marine Corps, right? Which is brutal in and of itself, right? A massive reason why veterans take their life, because their identity, their community, their schedule, everything has now been stripped from them. And I don't like the term real world, because killing people overseas and doing those things is very, very real life. But
absolutely,
real society, American society, being integrated back into it, right, is a very, very tough transition. And so when he was home, I could tell that he was back in St. Louis. It was during COVID, so I was back from school. I was at TCU at the time, back from school. He had just got out of the Marine Corps, kind of figuring out what was next for him. And I could tell something was off, right? Because there was this weird kind of tension, right? At that time, I didn't know to the extent of what it was, right? I never really had to have hard conversations or even knew how to approach it, but so I didn't. And I remember on Valentine's Day, it had been a couple weeks since we'd last spoke, and I remember him and I saying we're going to talk on Valentine's Day. And I remember looking at my phone with his contact pulled up, and I was just like, man, I do not want to feel that awkward tension. I don't want to feel that anxiety. I don't want to do it. I don't want to ask him what's wrong. I just, I didn't want to have that conversation, and I didn't. And I'm sure he was looking at his phone thinking the same thing, and then, 5 days later, on February 19th, 5 or 6 days later, I got the call from my mom that he had taken his life. So for me, man, talk about self-reflection, right? It's like with any family member who goes through losing someone from suicide, it's always the what ifs. If we talked that day, would that have saved his life? Right? What could I have done differently? Thankfully, that shame and that guilt didn't take me down too much of a rabbit hole. And I just knew that God put it on my heart that I needed to, channel this grief in this mourning into something impactful, right? Because there's 3 ways to respond after something like that happens, right? You can let that shame and guilt eat you alive and fall into self-destructive patterns like addiction and, depression and anxiety. And I certainly had some of that. Looking back at it, you can take the numb approach, right? Which is to completely block it out, and to just lock those demons in the basement, which will come up later in life. And then the third thing is, like you said, right? How do you take that energy, right, and put it into something positive? And thankfully, that's the route that God had for me. So really, it just started off with the 38 challenge, right? I was familiar with warrior workouts and the Murph challenge. My brother, when I was back from college, would wake me up at 6 a.m. to go outside in, negative degree weather in St. Louis, and we'd, sprint up hills together. So I was like, well, this seems appropriate, right? To make a workout in his memory. So, but I wanted the meaning behind the workout to be the most important thing. So when I created the 38 challenge, it was all about how do we create a community where people feel comfortable suffering together, right? And leaning on one another when suffering. So I created the 38 challenge, the workout. It's a 400-meter run, 38 push-ups, 38 sit-ups, 38 squats, doing as many rounds of that as you can in 38 minutes, right? With an optional 20 or 40 pound vest. However, the beautiful thing about suffering is that it's different for everyone, right? So long as you're using 38 as a variable to create your own idea of suffering and something that's challenging for you, then you're doing the 38 challenge, right? So, and I've mentioned this before, but at our events, we host large scale workout events where we invite different nonprofit partners to be there. But we've had, toddlers crawling for 38 minutes to elderly people walking up and down stairs for 38 minutes to, adaptive athletes in wheelchairs doing push-ups, right. And ski ergs and all that kind of stuff. So, and then we have, special operators with 40-pound vests cranking out 10 rounds, it's whatever suffering looks like to the individual. But yeah, that's really the purpose of the 38 challenge. And, originally I got into understanding, CTE, right. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And that's originally where the dollars went to. So that was kind of my introduction to the space, and just really learning about the problem in the brain. And, that has, evolved over time, but that's kind of how it all happened initially.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important to understand that the research continues to drive on, and we are learning new things it feels like each and every day. New things are coming out, new studies are being published. And it's insane to me that I never knew a fraction of it, what I was in. I had no understanding that the exposures that we were, on a daily basis, just simple range days, simple, what we tend to think while we're in uniform, just a mortar range, just sending rounds down range. None of that was in my headspace of how dangerous this stuff really is. And the precautions just weren't there. Like, when you started studying this, how did you eventually say, okay, like, we have to grow bigger? It can't just be about the 38 challenge. We need to start looking at what we can do to help these guys out.
For sure. Yeah. So in the beginning, right, when I created the 38 challenge, it was all about awareness, right? How do we empower a hard population of warriors to do a hard thing, which is to ask for help, right? Thankfully, as you kind of alluded to, we're definitely going in that direction, right? The vulnerability piece, people understanding that you can't ask for help, like that has evolved tremendously, right? Which is amazing. And for the CTE route, in the brain injury space, like I just kind of got the conviction that I was just raising awareness for a problem that everyone's very, very aware of. The last thing that my brother Googled before taking his life was what happened to Junior Seau and what happened to Junior Seau's family.
No shit.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So he knew that something was very wrong with his brain, and he was worried that he was going to hurt people around him.
Yeah.
Is the only possible conclusion, right, from that last Googling thing. But the narrative on right now is all fear, right? There's not that much hope out there, So from my perspective, I was always fascinated about these emerging modalities that you hear so much about: hyperbaric oxygen, psychedelics, right? Like all these different things which are becoming more popular. So I was like, I want to actually deploy something that helps us solve the problem. So then I created the Brain Optimization Lab, which is essentially like the for-profit arm of the 38 Challenge. And the focus there is to be a research and development company, right? So that we can research some of these integrative therapies, right? So that's kind of when I got that conviction of, let's move towards that route.
Absolutely, man. I just had Brian Peters on, NFL veteran, and a huge advocate for breath, cold water exposure. And that the thing that really aggravates me is seeing and personally witnessing in my own life, my own adventures into that realm of doing uncomfortable things early in the morning, getting cold, understanding that there is science, there is efficacy, and but more importantly, seeing the lives that are being changed. I've got a great friend that runs nonstandard.org, and their whole purpose of that mission is to get ice barrels in the hand of our soft guys that are asking for it. But people are still saying like, oh, that's witchcraft. There's no science behind it. Like, literally, I've seen people's life change once they start doing this. And it's not about, if it works, if we have a large amount of individual who are changing, who are getting better, like, we should listen to that. But there's such a pushback from individuals within the community, like, there's not enough evidence into it. And I completely applaud you for being willing to dive into integrative space, because there are so many things that are changing lives right now. I just had to give that shameless plug to nonstandard.org. Adam, what you're doing is amazing. Being able to get this out into the guys' hands, like it's, I mean, and you've probably seen it yourself. You get into the cold tub and you make it a part of your daily life. Like, it changes you.
I actually just talked about this morning. I mean, and from my perspective, I don't think there's any more powerful tool than a cold plunge and breath work, truthfully. And so, one of the points you just made, so that's the purpose of the Brain Optimization Lab, right? Because so in the scientific community, right, with these modalities, like you said, there's not enough research for it to be, for it to be respected and integrated. Hyperbaric oxygen is a great example of this, right? Someone whose life's been saved by hyperbaric oxygen. No doubt.
Yep.
And so do I. And so when I was hearing these things, it's like, okay, well, this guy showed me his before and after of his brain imaging and credits this HBOT to saving his life. Like, why does the science not back that? And the reason is because there's in the space, right, especially for HBOT, there's a lot of inconsistent data, right? So two-part. One, any pharmaceutical, any biotech technology, right? A lot of the data which a company is presenting is going to be biased, right? Because they're going to make sure that their numbers look good. So that already creates a lot of skepticism and smoke and mirrors, right? The second piece, especially with hyperbaric oxygen, is that there's a lot of inconsistency in the actual protocols implemented. So when HBOT started to hit the scene about 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was used for wound healing, right? So and that's at that's from 2 to 3 atmospheric pressure at 100% oxygen. There's especially for brain injuries, right? You can OD, you can overdose on oxygen. There's a point where it's too much and it actually becomes damaging, right? So the protocols which are effective are typically between 1.5 and 2 atmospheric pressure, breathing at 95% oxygen, creating something called hypoxia, right? So what that means is that after 20, so you get in the chamber, right? Let's say it's an hour session at 2.0 atmospheric pressure. After 20 minutes, you take the mask off. You're breathing 95% air. After 20 minutes, you take it off for 5 minutes. So then you go back to the typical oxygen there. I believe it's 23%. And then after 5 minutes, you put it back on. That induces a hypoxia like effect, right? Which then releases things like stem cells, right? Which can I'm not equipped enough to talk about the science that deeply. We have people a lot smarter than I to do all that. But that's just an example, right? Of so if you have 20 different protocols, right, and 10 of them are effective and 10 of them are not effective, right, then of course there's going to be inconsistent data. So what we need to do is find the protocol which is effective and then spread that protocol over 100, 500, 1,000 individuals so that we can get that scientifically rigorous data, right? And that's an example of something that the Brain Optimization Lab is trying to do. Take that to cold plunge, right? So one of the studies we're most excited about is sauna, cold plunge, and breath work, right? How does that impact those impacted by brain injuries, as well as those suffering with PCS and dealing with trauma, depression, anxiety, etc. So we're looking at it from a mechanistic perspective, meaning how does this protocol and the individual mechanisms of sauna, cold plunge, and breath, how do just the mechanisms impact someone with brain injury, right? For example, cold therapy, right? Cold therapy increases dopamine and norepinephrine by 200%. Adderall also does the same thing, right? So Adderall is like 1,000%, but you can imagine, and Adderall, we don't have to get into that, but obviously it's incredibly addictive and has gnarly side effects and all that kind of stuff. But when someone's dealing with a brain injury, one of the main things from someone who's dealing with a TBI is dopamine seeking activities, right? That's why you see so much addiction. That's why you see, hypervigilance, right? That's why you get these obsessive thoughts of not being able to escape certain thought loops, right? Because your brain is being rewarded for having the same thought loop over and over and over again. That's the dopamine system, right? So just with cold therapy, you're increasing dopamine norepinephrine by 200%, right? So you're satisfying those needs that you're in your brain so you can then get motivated and focus on the task at hand, right? And then increase, the feel-good molecules, all that kind of stuff. You're also reducing oxidative stress, right? Another massive problem experienced by operators, right? You are releasing cold shock proteins, right, which increases BDNF, your brain's ability to be plastic, right, and create new pathways, right? So from a scientific perspective, it's not woo-woo. Like this is all known science and out there. It just hasn't been applied to the brain injury community, and also has not been applied at scale. So that's one of the things that's the purpose of the Brain Optimization Lab. And our thought process is, hey, the best results will come from a multimodality approach. Right?
Yes.
So when I mentioned hyperbaric oxygen, what we're studying is hyperbaric oxygen in combination with photobiomodulation or red light stimulation, right? Something called targeted HBOT. So real high level, once you increase oxygen in the body, through targeted photobiomodulation transcranially, we can direct that oxygen to go to different parts of the brain.
Really?
Right? So, yep. So HBOT has its own mechanisms, right? And how it deals with the brain, from reducing inflammation, releasing stem cells, reducing oxidative stress, right? These are all scientifically proven things from hyperbaric oxygen. Photobiomodulation increases the mitochondria strength, right? Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, which then increases ADP, your body's ability to create energy, Right. So, and then it also has regenerative effects, right? So we can start to repair some of the damaged cells in the brain. Those are two mechanisms of HBOT and photobiomodulation separate from each other. It makes sense that if we put them together, their mechanisms will complement each other so we get even better results. Same thought process with sonic cold plunge, breath work. Our goal, and from just a common sense perspective, you're like, yeah, of course, that makes a lot of sense. But the way that the scientific method is, it's one modality, right, for over a certain period of time. And so we're trying to go the scientific method, use the scientific method to then prove this kind of holistic protocol approach, so that down the road, these protocols can be prescribed and given to people suffering, through insurance companies, et cetera. That's kind of the long-term goal of VOL.
Yeah, that's something that's needed. The way that we are treating, especially when you get out, and that's why I tell guys all the time, before you get out, before you leave, especially within the soft community, get treated, get referrals to these amazing brain treatment facilities, get vulnerable, get to the point where you're willing to sit down in front of that provider and say, hey, I've been at this for 20, 23 years. I really think I should be able to go to the STAR program or to PrEP to get treated, to get checked out. Because once you get on the outside, the VA is not going it's not going to send you to a polytrauma treatment center. They're just not. Like, you are going to sit in front of that VA provider. And I'm sorry, but this is the reality. And I know right now, I was like, well, it's not every VA is the same. Not every VA doctor is the same. Yeah, I get it. But for the majority of us, the VA doctor is going to sit down in front of you and look at you, and he's just going to start prescribing medication. And in my case, you're going to sit down in front of a provider and he's going to tell you the same thing for the next 3 sessions, and you're never going to make progress on anything. It's ridiculous. Get the treatment you deserve before you get out. Get referred to all these, like NICO. You have access to these, and there's, on the outside, the work is done by a lot of nonprofits, and there is hope. There is resources out there. But before you get out, start getting these issues treated. It's a lot easier on the outside, and I'll share some resources at the end of this, and I'll put them on the episode description. There are places you can go. There are people that will help, but it's a lot easier to start getting the treatment now. So if you're dealing with anything, and if anything that we've shared resonates with you and it's piqued your interest, sit in front of your provider today or make an appointment and start getting help. Because, man, I don't want guys or girls to suffer any longer. Like, the reality is, for the past 20 years, you've been deployed. You've been getting repeated impacts. It's time to get your brain checked out. With the people that you have worked with, what are some of the, like, you have to have data. Like, how fast are you seeing results?
For sure. Yeah. So full transparency, we're just now kind of starting to collect data, but I think a good case study is my partner. I won't disclose his name, but he played NFL football for 7 years, 8 years, was a 2-time Pro Bowler, right? Was top 100 player, had to retire due to too many concussions. He, especially with like the sonic cold plunge breath work, if done the right way, because a lot of athletes and operators, they're used to like the kind of white knuckle approach of the ice bath, right? Like, fuck, I just got to get in there and just grit it out. Like, that's not the approach that we take, right? So we teach them how to surrender, we teach them how to breathe, right? And these are all skills that can be translated to life. And so with something like cold plunge, right, where it's impacting, for example, if you take Adderall, you're going to feel it, right? And you're probably going to feel pretty good for a little bit. And it's the same thing with, and I'm not saying definitely do not take Adderall because it's addictive, but it's the same thing with a cold plunge. Like, you're going to, the feeling and the mechanisms that happen in the brain are instantaneous, right? So you start to see those results. So, things can turn around quick, because especially with things like depression and anxiety, right? It's all about depression, especially. It's all about momentum, right? So if we can give you a pocket where you feel good and you start to put things together, you clean your house, you make a couple calls, right? You think more about your future. That's going to feed into this momentum that will then carry on to you getting out of that depression and then excelling in life, right? So, the hope is that, with these like things like traumatic transcranial magnetic stimulation, right? The SAINT protocol, right? People are coming in suicidal, and then after one day of treatment, their suicidal ideation's gone. Same thing with ketamine, right? So from the data perspective, like people can start to feel a lot better quickly, right? But you have to, like anything, like you can't go to the gym for 6 months and then start to see results and then stop, right? You're going to go right back to where you were, right?
Yes.
So it's the same thing with your brain health. You have to have these practices and these rituals, right? And be consistent if you want to see that progress get better over time. But you can start seeing results. I mean, something like cold plunge, right? You can start to see results within hours. And then, typically for like something like hyperbaric oxygen, you need to get 40 sessions in, right? You have to stay consistent with it. But then, again, progressively that momentum will build and you'll start feeling like your old self again. And then ultimately feel better than you ever have.
Yeah. You brought something that's really important to reflect on for a little bit. The importance of addressing these habits that are not self-serving, that ultimately derail our lives. And before we can literally, we have to be able to identify the bad habits and then build good ones alongside. Because if you don't start establishing these great habits, like waking up early, I always tell people dude, you want to get up to the gym, you want to get better, you have to start from ground up, look at your day to day and start looking at your bad habits and start building a good one to remove that bad habit. So you eat like crap. All right, we got to get you eating better. We got to get you waking up a little bit earlier so you can go to the gym. And that's something that is missed. Everybody looks at the end result. Everybody looks at that fit body you're going to have. But the reality is you got to fall in love with the process, falling in love with the good habits. That is the hardest thing to sell people.
100%. Yeah. And I think it's not a hard sell. It's hard to implement, right? Because I mean, hate to say it, but there's no easy way out of dealing with depression and anxiety. It will be the hardest battle of your entire life. It'll be way harder than killing Taliban. It'll be way harder than that, right? It will be the hardest battle of your life, but it's so worth it, right? Because you get to live and you get to experience the joyness of life. And I mean, what is life without suffering? How can you experience the greatness of life without it, right? And one of the things I have just taken to my heart is to accept suffering is to transcend suffering, right? So if you can just accept that, hey, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm dealing with trauma, I'm dealing with brain injuries, this sucks, I'm suffering, but you accept it and you lean into that discomfort, right? And you take it head on, then dude, you've already transcended it, right? You've accepted it. And I would say I'm blessed with trauma, dude. I'm so blessed to have, as weird as it is to say, and it still doesn't, I don't know if I believe it yet, but I'm blessed to have lost my brother, right? Because I'm so empathetic now, right? And I can understand people suffering, right? And I've been to the point where, I mean, I've had a gun up to my head, right? So I know what it's like to deal with those thoughts. And I mean, we can get into that. We don't have to, but I know what it's like to go down the Reddit, rabbit hole of ways to kill yourself, right? And this is only language of people who have been there can understand, right? I know what it's like to go on YouTube and just find videos of people dealing with depression and anxiety because maybe they understand where I'm at, right? But without that suffering, I would have no place in this space, but to your point, it's you have to be willing to fight, right? You have to understand that, once you raise your hand and you get vulnerable, that's step one. It's a hard step, but that's just the beginning. And you have to take initiative of the process, right? And have people around you to hold you accountable. And you have to stay consistent because, without that continuing to take steps forward and building that momentum, you're never going to get out of that darkness. And it's hard to hear, especially when you're in that spot, but it's the only way out,
Yeah, man, it's absolutely true what you just said a little bit ago. And it takes me back to that. We shouldn't be looking for a knight in shining armor to come save us. We should be looking for the knight with the fucked up, messed up armor to come along with us and help us find a way out. I can't do the work for you. And I hope that my scars and my vulnerability will show you that the empathy that I'm displaying is not just empty words, that you can see the scars and the fails and all the trauma that I wear as vulnerability to show you that there's a way out, to show you there's a path out of it. And it's going to take work. It's not going to be easy, but you have to understand that pain and suffering will dissipate. And the process, that journey, that's what you fall in love with, because there's no final destination. Here's the whole full disclosure, truth moment. The journey is what you have to love. The end is that beautiful ending that we don't know what comes after. You meet your maker, he's with you, and you walk off into the pearly gates. That's the end. The end is not you're fit, you're happy, you're smiling, and everything's rosy and better. No, that's the journey. And along that way, you're gonna have great days, you're gonna have bad days, you're gonna have indifferent days, and then you realize, oh shit, this is life. This is life. This is just a continuation of using the tools each and every day and living and getting better. And I wasn't there for the longest time. I had that false sense of understanding that it'll just get better, and that I'm working towards that happy moment where I'll always be better. It's like, that's not realistic. You want to get better. You want to improve. And then when you start, we always do the crawl, walk, and run methodology. When you're suffering and you haven't found a way out, and you haven't found those resources, you're crawling, you're struggling, and then you get a little bit better and you start walking, and then you get really good and you start running. And that's when you start advocating and start helping others. In your own journey, Brandt, how did you start running again? Because I have to imagine suffering and going through the loss and knowing that you're intimately part of our community that have suffered with these things. What was the first thing that got you, okay, I'm getting better, I'm going to do this to get better? Was it the conventional? Did you go to talk therapy? Did you start leaning into those conventional modalities, or did you lean more into like the physical fitness, the cold water, and the breath work?
For sure. Yeah. So I'll just kind of give a high level of my journey. So, after Matt died, obviously was dealing with a lot of the guilt and shame and grief and all that. I was having panic attacks at night, which is not unusual after having such a traumatic event, like, losing your best friend or brother to suicide. But my doctor put me on Ativan, which is a benzodiazepine. You're supposed to be on a benzo for maybe 2 weeks. He prescribed it to me every night for sleep, right? For 4 years.
Holy shit.
Yep. And I would typically wash my benzo down with a glass of wine or two every night.
Yep.
And in the morning I would feel groggy. So he prescribed me Adderall, and I was on that for 4 years as well. So I was on, 2 narcotics for 4 years without any understanding of how that was impacting my brain. All I knew is that I was sleeping good and that I was crushing work, right? Like that's like, but I was so numb to my feelings, and I was so numb to all those things. And I was just obsessed with, how do I grow the 38 challenge? How do I just burning the candles from all sides, and that led to a crash and burnout. Hardcore. Yeah. Hardcore. And so once when you're withdrawing from, so a couple stats for you. So, have you seen the movie Smile? Yeah. Okay. So when you lose someone to suicide, and it's not the exact same thing as the movie Smile, but this is what I think about when I watch it. If you lose a family member to suicide, the chances that you take your life are increased by 200%, because your brain now understands that that's a way out, right? When you're withdrawing from benzodiazepines, you're at a 600 to 800% more likely to take your life when you're withdrawing from these medications. Yeah. So you want to talk about the military problem, and that's the same thing with the SSRIs. Is there's literally a black box warning for suicide, right? So I think a major part of the military problem is the fact that these guys are being prescribed so many medications that after a couple months they realize that this isn't working. As a matter of fact, it's making things worse. So then they rip themselves off the medication, and now they're in this danger zone of their brain chemicals all out of whack, right? And they think that it's just they think that it's just the trauma, and they think that it's just the brain injuries, which it definitely plays a part. But you're also now dealing with all the chemical imbalances in your brain because you just cold turkey 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 medications. That's a side note. So I went through all that, right? And that was like literally battling demons, like actual demons, right? Like that people who go through that experience, like it's you can't really explain it, but it's not normal depression, anxiety. It's like you're literally like, it's gnarly stuff, man. So I would say going through that, I mean, my faith was the most important thing, right? Having a relationship with my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ was a huge thing for me, right? And the spiritual fitness component of it. And then there was a couple months where I wasn't exercising, and I, just kind of the depression, staying in bed, all that kind of stuff. So, when I started to get out of that really, really dark spot, the first thing for me was just getting back into the gym, getting back into boxing. And then I discovered cold therapy and breath work. And that for me was when the momentum started to really pick up, right? It's when I started doing, the cold plunges, the breath work, because naturally those were restoring some of the things that were lacking in my brain because of withdrawing from those medications. And then that momentum led into, just being back on fire, right, for the 30-day challenge without the help of stimulants and those types of things. And then I was in a really good spot. And then it all happened again because of just failures in business, right? Failures in the entrepreneurial journey, right? And then I kind of fell back into, again, those same dark spots. But then I just stuck to it, right? It was part of just kind of accepted the suffering, understood that it was going to be shitty for a little bit. And it's just kind of waiting for that, working hard each day, and then waiting for that momentum to come back, right? And getting clear on the vision again, getting clear on, where we want to go. And I think that's a very important part too, right? Because as we've mentioned, like, we can do anything we want for the brain, right? And we will help a lot with the brain, and we will help to quiet the mind, right? But we have to help veterans and warfighters. We have to help them build a life outside of the military where, one, they still feel like a warrior, and understand that just because the uniform came off doesn't mean that they're no longer a warrior. And then we have to help them be plugged into communities and build a life that's worth living for them, right? I think, groups like Warrior Rising and veteran entrepreneurial organizations. I mean, you understand this yourself. Like, as a going into the corporate world works for some veterans, for most, it probably doesn't. I mean, you're not going to find that same level of fulfillment that you did, when you were protecting your country with brothers and sisters. So helping to find a life worth living, right, and creating that hero's journey, right. Understanding that the suffering that you're going through right now is necessary for you to become that higher version of yourself down the road, right? So we have to paint a picture of what you want that higher version of yourself to be, right? And then once we have the destination and you understand where you're at now, then we create the blueprint, and we start to fill that gap of how you get to that higher self. And then once you get there, if you ever do, which I hope that you do, we're going to level it up even more. Like you said, the journey never stops, right? We always get better. So yeah, I would, just to summarize, I think for me, the spiritual fitness component of it was super, super important. The understanding things like sauna, cold plunge, breath work. And I think from like the spiritual perspective, like I grew up, just, stereotypical Christian, right? And my faith was not my own, but understanding things like consciousness, right? Understanding how shame and guilt and all these things, like how it plays into your life, right? That was a super, super important piece for me, because I understood that the patterns that I was in directly, correlated to how I was feeling from like an emotional and spiritual perspective, right? So then understanding how do you kind of transcend these levels to get up to where you can give back to other people, right? And accept where you're at. And all those things. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. Dude, I'm so glad you brought up the faith part. Because it truly is mind, body, and spirit, man. And I, when my body failed, when my mind failed, I didn't have spirit. I didn't have faith. And that's why I know for a fact now that I'm back in my faith, now that I go to church, now that I believe 100% in my faith, I know without a shadow of a doubt, the reason why I fell so low and I had it just deteriorated was there was no pillar left to fall back on. Yep. And it's a beautiful reminder. I now get to advocate for it. It's like, and again, it doesn't matter what your faith is. Proud Catholic, if that's also what your faith is, then great, awesome. I just want you to connect with your faith. Understand that, dude, we're great at going to the gym. Like active duty guys, like whether you're conventional military or soft guys, like you love to crush the gym. So the body is like super important to us. The mind, we fall apart when we don't take care of ourselves in the mental health space, when we don't address anxiety, when we don't address our depression. So that's also weak. But if you can strengthen the faith pillar, if you can strengthen just by going to church, just by connecting with your faith, by, doing what you need to do to make that pillar strong, when those other two fall apart, you're going to be okay. It's easier to rebound. It's way easier.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I also really, really don't like when people are like, just pray, just go to church. Like it's all going to be good. Like, that's not how it works, and especially when you are so depressed and so dark, right? Like, and you feel nothing. Yeah. Right. Then it's very, very hard to connect to your creator there. You just have to have the faith and understand that he's there with you. Right. Even though you don't feel it, even though you don't believe in it in that moment, like just having that understanding. Right. And like that, because it's not up to you at that point. Right. There's something else that's carrying you. Right. Yeah. As Jesus did in the cross and from my view. But I certainly understand like our goal is to get people out of that darkness, right, through these different protocols so that they can get to a point where then connecting to a higher power, right, to the source, right, becomes easier because they have a brain that is not trying to kill them. Yeah. Right. Like yes. That's our goal. And like, when I talk to people who are really deep, who are really depressed. And again, I'm not a doctor, right? I'm just someone who's been there, right? And I'm someone who's entrenched in it. But, a lot of the times when you're dealing with suicidal thoughts, it's a not to get political, but it's kind of ironic, right? Like demons will use pronouns. Yeah. Right. Dude. Like they'll say and yeah. When you understand, it's like, the demons, like for my case, like it was like, you are a piece of shit. Yeah. You should kill yourself. You did this. You did that. It wasn't, I'm a piece of shit. I should kill myself. It was always the perspective of you. Yes. And that's how you know that there's something outside of you that's attacking. And that's when I say your brain's trying to kill you. Yeah. Like those aren't your thoughts. Those are literally the thoughts from Satan, the opposition, right? Yeah. The one who wants to see, kill, and destroy. Like, you. And if it becomes I want to kill myself, then you just have to understand that these demons have trained you well enough that now you believe them, right? Now you believe that lie, right? And they've convinced you that it's like a champion in sales, right? Yeah. They've convinced they don't have to sell you anymore, right? And if you're at that spot, like there's still hope, right? Like do not cave to those voices, do not cave to those thoughts, but you have to understand that's where it starts, right? This is not your thoughts. It's not thoughts from God. It's thoughts from the evil in this world, right? That doesn't want you here.
Yeah. And it's important to highlight, man, if you're in the trenches right now, like I got to say, you're in this fight right now, reach out, man. I know it's hard.
Have to.
You have to. And this whole concept, this whole thing started with 3 friends that were in the thick of it, in the fight, and we just kept texting each other. We just kept texting. We just kept communicating. And I'm telling you, when that voice in your head tells you that nobody wants to hear from you, trust me, everybody wants to hear from you. Keep reaching out, keep connecting. That saves lives. And if you're out there, and I'll say it's our little thing that we talk about, LGOPS, man, form your little group of paratroopers, form your little group of friends. It's hokey, but get 3 or 4 friends every morning, text each other. I'm up. I love you. Headed off to work, headed off to the gym. Reconnect, man. We are so, and before you connect with your local community, I know it's hard to get out there, but at least connect with your veteran friends, reconnect with your military friends, and start getting that morning up message. We all did accountability for 10, 15, 20 years of your military career. Continue getting accountability of your friends. It's a simple text message. It saves lives. I'm telling you, 988, it's a great resource, but you know an even better resource? That friend that you served with, that brother that you were in the trenches with, in the fight with. Reconnect with your friends. Brandt, I can't thank you enough for being here, brother, and for being in this fight with all of us. What you're doing is saving lives, and it truly is a blessing to have somebody else out there waving the banner and trying to change things. We like to think that somebody is coming for us, that the cavalry, that SOCOM and everybody else will come in and they'll save the day. But the truth is, it's guys like you, brother. It's guys like you that are out there saying, fuck you, I'll do it. And I can't thank you enough for doing that, man. If we want to find out more about the 38 Challenge and the Brain Optimization Lab, where do we go?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. Go to www.the38challenge.com. The Brain Optimization Lab is we're still kind of, not on the scene yet from a public perspective. We want to, win some of these contracts first. So, we can, once guys do come that route, we can for sure help them. But, I'm also part of a group called the Genesis Brain Institute, here in Tampa, Florida. Right. So nice. For people who are out here suffering, like we can help to diagnose what's going on. We have treatments and modalities to help you, and we'll take care of the cost through the 38 Challenge. So if you are suffering, reach out to my email, Brandt@the38challenge.com, and we will get you help. I would say go to the 38 Challenge, reach out to my line, my email directly. If you're suffering, and, we'll get you the help that you deserve, but you gotta take that first step, and you gotta ask for help. And, if you're not willing to put in the work, then don't come. Simple as that, because we can't help people who don't want to put on the work. I wish that we could, but we can't.
You got to be willing to want it, man.
Yep, you have to be willing to want it, because nothing's going to work if you don't want it, and if you don't believe that you can heal, right? And you can heal, right? I promise that you can, right? So it's just now it's up for you to have that faith and that belief that you'll get better, and you're willing to put in the work.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. Again, thank you for being here. For everybody tuning in, thank you. Appreciate you guys tuning in and checking us out. Please check out Brandt's website, and again, reconnect with your friends, stay in touch, connect with each other every morning, send that text message. And until we see you guys next time, please take care of each other, and take care.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. If you like what we're doing and you're enjoying the show, don't forget to share us, like us, subscribe.